In the heart of the countryside, where mornings are filled with the song of birds and the aroma of fresh coffee mingles with the pure air, lived the Smith family. The family consisted of 6 members. Robert, the patriarch, a man of average height with grey hair and a firm gaze. Susie, the matriarch, with her long dark hair always tied in a bun and a welcoming smile. Their children were Emma, the eldest, with her free spirit and curly hair. James, the second, a quiet young man with a generous heart. Louisa, the third, always curious and full of questions. And Sarah, the youngest, only 8 years old, with blonde hair and blue eyes, known for her sweetness and fertile imagination. On a sunny day, Robert decided it was time to expand the family in a different way. He took everyone to the town fair, where he heard about a litter of puppies needing a home. It was there that they met Max, a golden brown puppy with expressive eyes. Sarah fell in love with him immediately, and with everyone's consent, Max was adopted. Max quickly became a constant presence in the Smith household. He ran through the fields, explored the garden, and most importantly, became Sarah's inseparable companion. The youngest and the puppy were seen together in all their childhood adventures, from exploring nearby streams to playing hide-and-seek in the fields. Max seemed to understand every word Sarah said, and they developed a unique, silent communication. Gradually, the Smith family's routine adjusted to the presence of the new member. Emma, James and Louisa also adored Max, who quickly adapted to country life. Susie often watched Sarah and Max playing in the garden, smiling at the happiness in her daughter's eyes. Robert, despite being a practical and few-worded man, couldn't hide his affection for Max, especially seeing how he cared for Sarah. One afternoon, while Sarah and Max were playing near the stream, something unexpected happened. Sarah, in her childish excitement, slipped on a wet stone and fell into the water. Max instinctively jumped in after her, barking frantically. The noise caught Susie's attention, who ran to the spot. Seeing Sarah soaked and scared but unharmed, embraced by Max, Susie felt a deep sense of relief. Sarah, sobbing, said, "Max saved me, Mummy." Susie knew at that moment that Max was more than just a dog. He was a true guardian. Days passed, and the bond between Sarah and Max grew stronger. They were inseparable, and everyone in town knew the duo. Max accompanied Sarah to school, waited patiently outside, and together they would return home. Their daily adventures and companionship made Sarah feel safe and loved. Max's presence brought a new dynamic to the Smiths' life, reinforcing family ties and bringing even more joy to the home. That night, as the family gathered for dinner, Sarah excitedly recounted how Max had saved her at the stream. Everyone laughed and praised the heroic dog. Robert, with a twinkle in his eye, petted Max's head and said, "You're truly part of the family now, Max." And so, Max became not just a guard dog, but a beloved and indispensable member of the Smiths. In the following months, Sarah and Max experienced many more adventures together. From exploring the woods to helping with farm chores, they were an unbeatable pair. Sarah, with her adventurous spirit and pure heart, found in Max a faithful and brave friend. And Max, with his unwavering loyalty, did everything to protect and bring joy to Sarah's life. Max's arrival brought a new light to the Smith household, illuminating the days and warming the hearts. And so life in the countryside continued, with the family united and happy, each day more grateful for the presence of Max, the dog who came to transform their lives forever. As Sarah grew, her bond with Max only strengthened. He was by her side through all her adventures and misadventures. Max was her guardian, always alert and protective. There was an incident where Sarah fell and scraped her knee, and Max ran home, barking frantically until Susie came out to see what was happening. Sarah knew she could count on Max for anything. The Smith family was close-knit, and everyone had a special fondness for Max, but it was undeniable that Sarah was the dog's favorite person. Emma, James and Louisa played with him, but no one spent as much time with Max as Sarah did. Susie, the matriarch, often watched the special relationship between the two and smiled, knowing Max was more than just a dog to Sarah. He was her confidant, friend, and protector. Years passed, and Sarah grew into a young woman. When she turned 18, she met Raphael, a charming and hard-working young man with whom she quickly fell in love. The relationship evolved rapidly, and soon they decided to marry. Sarah's departure was a bittersweet moment for the family, especially for Max, who seemed to understand that something was about to change. The wedding was a beautiful ceremony, and Sarah and Raphael moved to a nearby city where Raphael had found a good job. Sarah was excited about her new life, but deep down, she missed her family, and especially Max. She knew leaving Max behind would be difficult, but believed it was best for him to stay in the place he knew and loved. The first months of marriage were filled with happiness for Sarah and Raphael. They moved into a small apartment in the nearby city, decorated with care and the hope of a bright future. However, as time passed, Raphael began to grow distant, coming home later and later, and becoming cold and indifferent. Sarah, feeling increasingly lonely, tried to salvage the relationship, but her efforts seemed in vain. Less than a year after their wedding, Raphael asked for a divorce, leaving Sarah desolate and directionless. With no other option, Sarah decided to return to her parents' home in the countryside. 7 years had passed since she left to start a new life with Raphael. The farm where she grew up was still a haven of peace and happy memories. As she stepped off the bus, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Each step toward the Smith house felt like a journey back in time. When Sarah finally reached the front door, she was greeted with open arms by her parents and siblings. There was a mix of joy and concern on their faces, but everyone was happy to have her back. Max, now 10 years old, was older, with grey hairs beginning to show around his muzzle, and his movements a bit slower due to age. However, seeing Sarah, he seemed to rejuvenate for a moment. Max ran towards her with the same energy he had as a puppy. His tail wagged frantically, and he let out small yelps of joy. Sarah knelt down, receiving Max's warm embrace. She wrapped her arms around the dog, letting her tears flow freely. Max licked her face as if he wanted to dry each tear, his body pressed against hers in a gesture of pure devotion. Susie, Sarah's mother, watched the scene with a sad smile. She knew that moment was crucial for her daughter's emotional recovery. Sarah spent a few minutes hugging Max, feeling the comfort of his soft fur and his steady breathing. In that embrace, she found the strength to face the pain of the divorce and the sense of failure that haunted her. The following days were a time of readjustment. Sarah devoted herself to helping on the farm, finding solace in manual labor and the constant company of Max. He followed her everywhere, his steps firm despite his age. The long walks through the fields they took together when she was a child became part of the routine again. Max was always attentive to any sign of sadness in Sarah, offering his silent and comforting presence. Gradually, Sarah began to recover from the emotional blow. She knew the road to healing would be long, but with the support of her family and Max's unwavering loyalty, she felt ready to face the future. Max, in turn, continued to play his role as guardian and friend, proving that true love can overcome any adversity. A few weeks after her return to the Smith home, Sarah began to notice something was wrong. She felt constantly tired, had no appetite, and had a persistent pain in her abdomen. Initially, she thought it was the emotional stress of the divorce combined with the physical effort on the farm, but the symptoms only worsened. Susie, concerned about her daughter's condition, decided it was time to seek medical help. Susie took Sarah to the hospital in the nearest town, where they were greeted by a kind but serious doctor. After a series of tests and days of anxious waiting, the diagnosis came. Sarah had a terminal illness. The cancer had spread aggressively, and the chances of effective treatment were minimal. The news hit the Smith family like a bomb. Robert, always the pillar of strength, felt powerless in the face of the situation. Susie, with her maternal spirit, tried to be strong for Sarah, but cried silently at night. The siblings, Emma, James, and Louisa, were devastated, each coping with the pain in different ways. But everyone knew they needed to be strong for Sarah, who faced the reality of her own mortality with serene courage. Max, despite being a dog, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation better than anyone. His behavior changed almost instantly. He became even more protective and vigilant, rarely leaving Sarah's side. On good days, Sarah and Max walked through the fields, reminiscing about childhood times when everything was simple and full of hope. Sarah talked to Max as if he could understand every word, sharing happy memories and interrupted dreams. On bad days, when the pain was intense and Sarah could barely get out of bed, Max lay beside her, offering his silent presence as comfort. He rested his head on her legs, watching her with his expressive eyes full of love. Sarah stroked Max's soft fur, finding solace in the constant companionship of her faithful friend. The family adjusted their routine to care for Sarah. James and Robert shared the farm chores, while Emma and Louisa helped Susie care for Sarah at home. The sisters took turns staying by Sarah's bedside at night, but Max was always present, a constant amid the emotional chaos. Sarah knew time was short, but was determined to make the most of every moment with her family and Max. She spent hours on the porch, watching the sunset with Max lying at her feet. Sometimes Sarah recounted stories from the past, making everyone laugh and cry while Max listened attentively, as if he were also reminiscing. Max's presence during these difficult days was a balm for Sarah's soul. He seemed to know when she needed comfort and when she needed space. Max was there, a symbol of unconditional love and loyalty, offering more than any medical treatment could provide. As the disease progressed, Sarah became weaker. Pain and fatigue became constant companions, but Max remained by her side. On a particularly difficult day, Sarah looked at Max and whispered, "Thank you for never leaving me, my friend." Max, as if he perfectly understood, wagged his tail lightly and licked Sarah's hand, reaffirming his commitment to stay with her until the end. The Smith family knew the farewell was near, and although the sadness was overwhelming, they found comfort in knowing Sarah was surrounded by love and care, both human and canine. Max continued his vigil beside his owner, proving that true love transcends words and remains until the last breath. As Sarah's health deteriorated, the atmosphere in the Smith home grew heavier with apprehension and silence. The disease advanced, and each day seemed to bring new challenges. Max, now an old and faithful companion, rarely left Sarah's side. His movements were slower, his joints showing signs of age, but his determination to care for Sarah never wavered. Sarah spent most of her time in bed, too exhausted to do the activities she once loved. Max was always there, lying beside her, his brown eyes reflecting deep understanding and silent sorrow. On days when the pain was intense, Sarah found comfort in Max's gentle touch, who seemed to know exactly when to rest his head on her lap or simply be present. The Smith family did their best to keep the house filled with love and positivity. Susie prepared Sarah's favorite dishes, even if she could only eat small portions. Robert told stories of his youth, trying to bring smiles to Sarah's face, while Emma, James and Louisa took turns ensuring she was never alone. Max's constant and comforting presence seemed to be a thread of hope that kept everyone united. One afternoon, Sarah asked to be taken to the garden, a request the family promptly fulfilled. They placed her in a comfortable chair near the flower bed she loved so much. Max followed her, walking slowly, but determined to stay by her side. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Sarah took a deep breath, smelling the flowers and feeling the fresh air. Max sat next to her, resting his head on her lap. Sarah looked at each member of her family, feeling a wave of love and gratitude. She petted Max's head and whispered, "Thank you for always being with me." Max lifted his head and looked into her eyes as if confirming his promise never to leave her alone. The moment was serene but laden with a weight everyone could feel. As the days passed, Sarah grew weaker. The nights were long and silent, with the Smith family watching over her in shifts. Max was always present, his loyalty and love providing a silent source of strength for Sarah. One night, Sarah had a strange and vivid dream, where she was running through the fields with Max, free of pain, full of life and joy. She woke up with a sense of peace she couldn't explain. The following morning, Sarah seemed to have regained some of her old vitality. She asked to see her family gathered in the living room. Robert, Susie, Emma, James and Louisa joined around her, trying to hide the worry in their eyes. Sarah, with a serene smile, thanked each of them for all the love and care she had received. She held Max's hand, feeling the warmth and comfort he always provided. The following days were a mix of moments of lucidity and darkness, where Sarah oscillated between consciousness and deep sleep. Every moment of wakefulness, she made sure to express her love and gratitude. Max, sensing the gravity of the moment, never left her side, even when other family members needed to step away for a while. One night, a storm began to form, with thunder rumbling in the distance. The Smith family gathered around Sarah, feeling a growing tension. Max, lying beside her, lifted his head and looked around as if protecting Sarah from something invisible. Sarah, half asleep, whispered words of comfort to Max, who responded with a soft whine. The storm outside was a contrast to the calm inside Sarah's room. Each thunderclap seemed to mark the passage of time, and each lightning bolt briefly illuminated the anxious faces of the family. Sarah, surrounded by those she loved, felt enveloped in a deep sense of peace. Max, faithful to the end, remained by her side, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. The dawn brought an unexpected calm. The storm had passed, leaving a clear and serene sky. Sarah was surrounded by her family's love and the constant presence of Max. The Smith family was devastated by the uncertainty of the future, but found some solace in knowing that Sarah was enveloped by love and care. And so, with Max by her side, Sarah faced each new day with courage and serenity as the family awaited what would come next. As Sarah's health worsened, the need for intensive medical care became inevitable. The family decided it would be best for her to be admitted to the hospital in the city, where she could receive the necessary treatment and be more comfortable. The decision was painful for everyone, especially for Sarah and Max, who had never spent a day apart since they met. On the day of departure for the hospital, the Smith house was silent and melancholic. Susie lovingly packed Sarah's bag, placing clothes and objects that might bring some comfort. Robert was on the phone, finalizing the details with the hospital, while Emma, James, and Louisa tried to maintain a facade of normality, although their hearts were heavy. Sarah was in the living room, sitting in her chair, petting Max. The dog seemed to understand that something important was about to happen. His sad eyes followed Sarah's every move as she struggled not to cry. She knew she had to be strong, but the thought of being separated from Max, even temporarily, was almost unbearable. "Max," Sarah began, her voice soft and trembling, "I need to go to the hospital, my friend. I'll be fine, but you need to stay here and take care of our family, okay?" Max tilted his head as if trying to understand his owner's words. Sarah held the dog's face in her hands and looked into his eyes. "I promise I'll come back home, Max, I promise." Susie entered the room, trying to hide her tears. "Sarah, it's time," she said softly. Sarah nodded, and with one last hug to Max, she stood up with difficulty. Max let out a low whine, almost like a lament, as Sarah walked away. On the way to the hospital, the silence in the car was overwhelming. Sarah looked out the window, trying to memorize every detail of the familiar landscape while holding Susie's hand. Robert drove, his eyes fixed on the road, trying to keep his composure. When they arrived at the hospital, Sarah was taken to the room where she would be staying. The environment was clean and sterile, a painful contrast to the warmth and familiarity of her home. Susie and Robert helped Sarah settle in, arranging her belongings and trying to make the room feel a bit more welcoming. Before leaving, Sarah held Susie's hand. "Mum, take care of Max for me. He's going to miss me a lot." Susie nodded, tears silently streaming down her face. "We will take care of him, my love, and we will take care of you too." In the days that followed, the Smith family made regular visits to the hospital, always bringing news from home and Max. Every time she heard about the dog, Sarah felt a mix of longing and comfort. Max, for his part, spent long moments on the porch, looking down the road as if expecting to see Sarah at any moment. Despite the pain and uncertainty, Sarah's promise to Max remained firm in her mind. And so, surrounded by her family's love and the memory of her faithful friend, Sarah faced each day with the hope that one day she would return home and into Max's arms. After Sarah's funeral, the Smith house plunged into deep sadness. Sarah's vibrant and warm presence was sorely missed, and every corner of the house seemed to whisper memories of her life. Max, Sarah's loyal companion, felt this absence more intensely than anyone. He wandered through the house, restless, his eyes constantly searching for his owner who would never return. Max began spending more and more time at Sarah's grave. Initially, the family tried to bring him back, but Max always found a way to return to his vigil. He lay beside the grave, his muzzle resting on the cold ground, his eyes fixed on a distant point, as if waiting to see Sarah coming to meet him. Time passed, and Max became a constant figure at the cemetery. Visitors and townspeople were moved by the dog's loyalty. Some brought food and water for him, but Max only took what was necessary, as if his only concern was to be as close to Sarah as possible. One particularly cold night, Max was lying on Sarah's grave, his body tired and his breathing slow. The stars shone in the sky and a full moon bathed the scene in a soft, silvery light. Max, feeling the weight of the years and the pain of loss, closed his eyes and began to dream. In the dream, Sarah appeared as radiant as ever, smiling and calling for Max. She stood in a lush green field surrounded by wildflowers and bathed in sunlight. Max ran toward her with the energy of a puppy, his heart filled with joy at hearing Sarah's voice. She knelt down and opened her arms, receiving Max with a warm embrace. "I knew you'd never leave me, my friend," Sarah whispered as she stroked Max's soft fur. The dream felt so real that Max felt like he was truly beside Sarah again. They ran together through the fields, exploring streams and woods just like the old times. Sarah laughed and played with Max, her presence filling his heart with indescribable peace. Back at the cemetery, Max's body lay still, but there was an expression of serenity on his face. That night, Max quietly passed away, falling asleep forever next to Sarah. He had kept his promise never to leave her alone, and now they were together again, in a place where pain and separation didn't exist. The Smith family, upon finding Max asleep on Sarah's grave, knew he had finally found peace. They buried Max beside Sarah, knowing it was where he had always wanted to be. The story of Max and Sarah spread through the community, touching the hearts of everyone who heard about the dog's loyalty and unconditional love. Max and Sarah were now eternally together, their souls entwined in a bond that transcended time and space. The Smith family, though saddened by the loss, found comfort in the certainty that Sarah and Max were taking care of each other, as they always had. And so, in the small countryside cemetery, two graves side by side told the story of true and eternal love, reminding everyone that love and loyalty are the strongest bonds we can have in life and beyond.